Hello, and welcome to the Journal Star Sportswriters podcast. As always, I'm your host, Adam Duvall, joined by small school football beat writer Stan Morris, large school football beat writer Dave Reynolds. Welcome. Guys, I missed you.
Yeah, missed you too,
Good to
Adam.
be back.
Yeah.
After a few weeks. Yeah.
I know, it's been a few weeks. Thursday's Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone.
Thank you.
To you
too.
guys. Just a reminder, we're on Facebook Live, so feel free to drop us a comment or a question or whatever else you want to share. Friday and Saturday, it's down to it. State title days, last two days of the season. Man,
Eight champions will be crowned.
8 champions will be crowned. It seems like this season flew by.
really
Wow.
did.
Nobody from our area, unfortunately,
Yep.
this year.
We had a few that were close.
Yeah, we did.
Yep. Let's go ahead and go into that. We didn't have any large schools, unfortunately, but Dave will have some end of the year stats, kind of ping pong back and forth. Stan, let's start with you in 1A. Anawan Wethersfield had a great season, ended up coming up a little bit short, 44-30.
Right.
You know, just kind of tell me about that that game.
Yeah, I mean, a great game. I mean, you talk about a game where Alina has been, powerhouse, number one all year, just mowing people down, just not even close in any games, that they played. And Anawan, it's 30-6 at halftime. Alina goes up 30-6, and Anawan Wethersfield could have just went, okay, we're done with the season, but they make a really nice comeback, get pretty much right back into the game. I mean, it just show what quality of a team they are and how much leadership and senior leadership and Colton Quagliano, not a senior, but he's led them all year, up and down the field, and just a great season for them. Even though come up a little bit short, but man, when you get up against the Linas of the world, you have to be playing your very best game, and if you dig yourself into a hole like in that first half, though they made a great comeback, it's hard to. Hard to recover 24 points in a half, but they sure gave it a shot.
Absolutely. Well, Dave, let's go over to large school. You have some end of the year leaders. Let's start with passing.
Well, passing starts with Gabe Hernandez from Peoria High, and some astounding numbers here. 2,968 passing yards. And now Peoria High did win a playoff game, the only one of our 12 schools who, 6 of which made the playoffs, but Peoria High was the only one to win at least one. They won one, and then got beat out. So they played 11 games, but that's still an awful lot of passing yardage. He had a tremendous season, 38 passing touchdowns per Gabe. So great season for him. Travis Lutz from Limestone, number 2, 2,077 yards passing. Then you go to Jackson Chatterton from Dunlap, 1,929. Tristan Westbay from East Peoria, 1,424. And Wyatt Van Ness from Pekin, 1,420. So we had some good passing quarterbacks, and a couple of those kids, Lutz and Van Ness, are juniors. So, this could continue into next year as well.
Yeah, that's huge. I had the pleasure of seeing Gabe Hernandez as well as Jackson Chatterton a few times, and those guys could sling it for sure.
West Bay, a pretty good wrestler also for East Peoria.
Okay, he's a great athlete.
Hearing from him in the wintertime here.
Okay. Well, Stan, let's bounce back to you. 2A, Fieldcrest versus Sterling Newman. Sterling Newman advances to title 21-7.
For the 30th time. I mean, not that many, but they've certainly been there a lot of times. Yeah, but that was a game I was at. I was in Sterling. Great facility at Sterling High School, turf field, and just a real beautiful facility. But, Fieldcrest actually outgained Sterling Newman on the day. They had more yardage. They were able to move the ball. Just unfortunately had a few turnovers, a couple key interceptions happening there that Sterling Newman took advantage of both of those and turned those into touchdowns. And when you got down 14 at nothing at halftime. They had just a fantastic pass play. Sterling Newman did to Fieldcrest had it defended just about as good as you can defend it, but the pass just came right in over the defense, right in stride. Their receiver, 56-yard touchdown just a little bit before half, and that was tough. I mean, even I believe on that drive they had a potential of recovering a fumble and didn't get it. But just those little things here and there, as you look at the game as a whole, and of Fieldcrest, a play or two goes differently, and we're talking about Fieldcrest being in the state title game for the first time, because they played pretty well. They were right there with a traditional powerhouse, always there, 5 state championships I think in several seconds. But again, a great year of seniors led. Jackson Cusack McKay is a junior, but he was certainly their playmaker, a guy that can do just about anything. And they were able to shut him down a little bit, but he still made some plays throughout the course of the game. But you can't. It's just a fantastic season again for Fieldcrest, and they nothing to be ashamed of. That's the second time in 6 years that they've been into the semifinals. Derek Schneem is doing a great job over there. So they'll have a lot of seniors to replace, a lot of positions to replace, but I don't see them going down too far.
And it ends the run of the HOI in the title game.
Right.
How many years in a row was it?
And they have the last 3, because GCMS went back to back.
They had more than even that, because DMAC and then Tri-Valley before that.
Right.
So yeah, they had certainly a nice run, and yeah, it could have been another one. So
right. All right, Dave, let's head over to the large school. Let's look at those rushing leaders.
Yeah, Seth Glatz from Morton.
Hot stock.
Yeah, and I will take credit for coining that phrase in the fantasy part of the segment of
absolutely.
the show. Seth had a tremendous year. He's only a sophomore. 1,565 rushing yards this year, so we're going to be hearing from him a lot in the next couple of years as well. Cole Watkins from Washington, second at 1,304. Callie Stein from Canton rushed for 1,158. And Chris Dillon of Notre Dame, 1,149, right behind Stein. I know Javier Guyton from Peoria High was over 1,000 as well. I don't have his total here, but those are your top 5 rushers among the large school teams.
Some pretty impressive backs in that group, for sure. Mm-hmm. All right, Stan, let's switch back over to you in your 3A semifinal, which was Byron and Princeton.
Yeah,
that was a defensive battle.
Another defensive battle for sure. I mean, 7-3. That one ends up Byron winning that, going to back-to-back state title games. They got second last year. They beat Princeton last year, going to that title game last year. And this year a lot closer. It was 28-0 last year. Mm-hmm. This year it's 7-3, and certainly Princeton had their opportunities. They obviously, I think Byron kind of keys on Rondé Worrells, their running back, who's an all-state running back, and he just never could get going for them to kind of get some sustained yardage and be able to punch one in to the end zone. But again, another one that's just like one play, one missed tackle or whatever, and Rondé's gone for a touchdown, and we're talking about them getting a 10-9 win and moving on. So Ryan Pearson leading another group. You like Canton, as we mentioned, 3 years ago, led Canton to a semifinal game. He gets Princeton to the semifinals this year, first time since I believe it's 2004 that they were in the semifinals. So again, another great year for those guys, and just it's one of those things in semifinals. You're going to get the best defensive efforts from those other teams too, and so 7-3. It's tough to take when you're right there knocking on the door and just aren't able to punch a touchdown in.
Yeah, that was unfortunate that we don't get to see any of our area schools this weekend. Mm-hmm. All right, Dave, back over to you to the large school. We're talking receiving leaders now.
At the top is Quagliano Mack at Peoria High.
No
which
surprise.
Should be no surprise since Gabe Hernandez needed to find a target on all those yards. Quagliano had 883 receiving yards this year. Casey Erickson from Dunlap, a fine receiver as well, 726. Zach Otten from Limestone, 690 yards receiving. Another Eagle, Gabe Calhoun, had 647. And Sebastien Hill from Pekin, 623. So those are your top 5. There were a couple others. Nate Thornton was close in that list, and a couple others that were over 500. So pretty good crop of receivers as well this year among the big schools.
A lot of good balance for receivers, running backs, and quarterbacks. All right, so the second to last portion of our program today, our podcast, we're going to be talking some Player of the Year finalists. So there's one Player of the Year. You name 11 on offense, 11 on defense. Do you guys have special teams?
Well, I put a specialist on each the offensive and defensive sides.
So we have 23. So the
24.
24.
You got one on the defense side.
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course.
Okay, so 24. Okay, so 24. And included in that is the Player of the Year. We don't have 25,
Right.
correct?
No, we do not have.
No.
All right, I just want to make sure that is straight. And that'll be out, the first or second week of December?
Second week in December.
Second week of December, okay. So, Dave, let's start with you. Give me one of your finalists, someone that you kind of went back and forth on. No spoilers here. Everyone will find out who the Player of the Year is when it comes out. We're just going over some finalists.
Well, let's start with Sebastien Hill from Pekin. I know I mentioned he was 5th among the receivers, but this kid could do it all. I mean, he played defense. He stepped in to play quarterback for a game and a half when the quarterback, White Van Ness, was injured, and was very proficient there. He caught passes. He ran the ball. Just a really solid all-around football player. And so I think he'll be, if I were to pick among the top 3 considered for Player of the Year, he would be one of them.
Okay, yeah. Name you might not expect to hear. Stan, how about you? Who was one of your finalists for Player of the Year?
Well, we certainly have to look at Colton Quagliano for Anawan Wethersfield, a junior. Had just a fantastic year, over 3,000 yards passing, 39 touchdowns. Led them. Obviously led them into the semifinals, unbeaten into the semifinals. Just a fantastic year. Really a solid defensive back as well. He's certainly one to consider when you're looking at that.
Okay. Dave, back to you. Who's another player that you considered?
Well, I'd mentioned Seth Glatz from Morton earlier, a sophomore, led the way among our rushers in the large school teams. He also caught passes, 146 receiving yards, and he totaled 23 touchdowns. So he found pay dirt quite often. So as I mentioned before, he's a name we're going to be hearing from a lot in the next 2 years, and he's definitely among those considered for Player of the Year this year.
Okay. Stan, how about you? Who is also in consideration on the small school side?
Well, I think you also have to look at, again, at quarterbacks. It's quarterback year for a lot of the small schools. Alex Merlot from IVC just had a fantastic year leading that team to 10-0, and never before. Greg Ghosts have gone 10-0 before. Just a steady passing the ball, over 1,800 yards passing with 17 touchdowns there. He led the team in rushing as well with 13 more touchdowns. Just kind of the leader of that team, and somebody that really came on strong all year. I mean, he's a 3-year starter, and so a veteran presence for the Ghosts. So.
Merlot like a fine wine,
Merlot
right?
like a fine, aging like a fine wine. Right.
Absolutely. All right, Dave, who was the third and final consideration?
Well, probably no surprise here. Gabe Hernandez from Peoria High. I mentioned his numbers before. Just astounding as the Lions quarterback. 2,000, almost 3,000 passing yards, 38 touchdowns, and just a real leader on that team. He's the Big 12 co-player of the year. Throw that in there. So he's already got a nice accolade to his credit. So he would be the third guy that we're strongly considering for that honor.
Okay. Stan, how about you? Who's your final consideration?
Well, certainly others in consideration as well, but a third one, you have to look at Matt Martin again as junior quarterback. It's his second year. He again passed for over 1,800 yards, came 5 yards away from getting 1,000 yards rushing. Last year he had over 1,000 passing, over 1,000 rushing. This year he passed the ball a little bit more this time, concentrated on that, and led Eureka again to the second round of the playoffs for a second year in a row. Just one of those two-way threats that he can run, he can pass. You got to be wary of him doing both, and he had some really good receivers to help him out with that too. So, obviously, another fantastic year for him too.
Right. All right, gentlemen, our final segment. Put 45 seconds on the clock and just give me your final wrap on the 2019 football season. Stan, let's start with you.
Okay. Well, I think you got to look when you're looking at small schools of those unbeaten teams. We had 4 teams that went through the regular season unbeaten and went, and some of those went deep into the playoffs. You're talking Knoxville, IVC, and Anawan, Wethersfield, and Fieldcrest. Those teams were unbeaten. Just you don't see that many unbeaten teams. Maybe a year you have one, or maybe have 2, but to have 4 unbeaten, and then you throw Princeton in, who's the number 1 seed in 3A that lost once during a regular season, but number 1 seeds and just fantastic seasons for those guys. Record seasons, school record type seasons. Making school history and those kind of things. So that was kind of cool to see that kind of thing happening. Farmington again goes on and wins another conference Prairie Land Blue title. They just kind of keep going. They had that string of regular season wins kind of snapped, but they're making new ones there too. So they had a big senior class that they'll have to see what happens next year. But just great years, just standout years from some of those, and so we talked about some of those individuals, but several individuals also stood out there. But you don't see that too often. So
absolutely. Dave, how about you? Give me your final season wrap.
Yeah, well, the big schools, we didn't have any undefeateds, but several teams obviously had good seasons. Half of our 12 made it to the playoffs, 4 in the Mid-Illini and 2 in the Mid-State. The Big 12. Excuse me, dating myself. But I just a word about Peoria High. We all knew they'd have a prolific offense if they stayed healthy, and they did stay healthy. And boy, did they rack up the yardage. They averaged total yards per game 526 yards.
Holy
That's
smokes.
a lot of yards per game, and almost an even split between passing and rushing. So a real balanced attack. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention on the Mid-Illini side the 2 co-champions, Pekin and Dunlap. Pekin's first Mid-Illini championship since joining, and Dunlap's second. And the notable thing about the Dragons, they started the season 0-3.
Right.
And led in all 3 of those games.
They did. So, but you have to give them credit for sticking with it and not getting down after starting the season that way, and just a really memorable season for the Dragons and Dunlap as well. I don't think anybody really expected them, to be a powerhouse this year, and I don't think I'd call them a great team, but they were so opportunistic. You know, they didn't blow people out, but they just seemed to know how to win. Those kids, you know, had something about them that they knew, you know, where to reach when they needed to, and make the big plays when they needed to make them. And so give them credit as well.
Okay. Well, gentlemen, it's been my pleasure this season. Be sure to follow our coverage for Player of the Year, which comes out the second week of December. We will have all 8 state title games picked. I think Dave is Dave pretty far ahead of us?
Actually, I took over the lead in the playoffs.
Whoa. Stan is leading. Dave won fantasy. Congratulations, Dave.
Thank you.
So look for our state title picks this weekend. That second week of December, look for Stan and Dave's story. Be sure, as always,
All area teams.
Yeah, and the all-area teams. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at PJ Star Sports. Join the conversation for all of our winter coverage. Hashtag PGS Preps. One last time. For Dave Reynolds, Stan Morris, our producer, Matt Dayhoff, I'm Adam Duvall. Bye for now.
Bye now.
Okay, thanks for having me.